Turning now to Nelson Mandela, who died this week at the age of 95. The Bay Area had been a hub of the anti-apartheid movement in the 1980s. Mandela visited here shortly after his release from a South African prison in 1990. His appearance filled the Oakland Coliseum. And Scott Shafer is here with me now to discuss the legacy left by Nelson Mandela. We had such a special relationship here with him in the Bay Area, didn't we?
We really did. You can see in that clip, Thuy, with tens of thousands of people packing in the Oakland Coliseum. It really was an extraordinary time. I think people this week are remembering back to the 80s and even the 70s, the late 70s, when Berkeley and San Francisco really formed the hub of a movement that moved eastward. It was a real coalition of students, labor, local officials, politicians, the governor, who was a Republican, George Duke Majan, all pressuring, working together and pressuring the South African government to ultimately let Mandela out of prison and then end apartheid.
And in fact, Congressman Ron Dellums was a key figure in that. He pretty much led the effort in Congress to win federal sanctions against South Africa. And he spoke at that event in 1990 at the Oakland Coliseum. And we actually have a clip from that. Let's take a look.
And the people of this community over and over stood up. So I'm asking you now, stand up. Give yourselves a hand. We made history.
And you know, Thuy, the extraordinary thing there is that Dellums had to introduce that time and again. And when it finally passed in 1986, President Reagan vetoed it. And the Senate at the time, the U.S. Senate, which was dominated by Republicans, overrode the president's veto. And so it's what's interesting to me, too, about this week is that, you know, at the time, these issues are very divisive and people are on both sides. But with time, the passage of time, you see which was the right side to be on. And you don't necessarily know that at the moment, but looking back, it's very clear that there were some people way out in front.
And looking at that, it brought back memories for me as well, because Dellums talked about the city of Berkeley standing up, and I was a student at UC Berkeley in the mid-1980s, and that was such a hub for the anti-apartheid protests. Some of the most powerful protests happened there, and you know, in 1985, 10,000 students boycotted their classes the day after. About 160 people, protesters, were arrested, and it was such an electrifying time. It was a topic that really united so many people from all different backgrounds in a way that few leaders can.
Yeah, and I think that's really true of the Bay Area, and it has been for a long time. People come here like you did and like I did from other places, and they get here and they often come from places where there was oppression, a lack of freedom, and they are so determined to be a part of any movement to expand the cause of freedom throughout the world. And I think this is a case of that happening here with Nelson Mandela and apartheid.
And it's just extraordinary. After nearly 3 decades in prison, having lost his freedom for that long, he never lost his values. He always hung on to the belief that hatred doesn't accomplish anything.
And you hope that maybe there'll be some lessons we can all learn today in this time of gridlock and, you know, partisan bitterness.
Yeah, a peace broker, a moral compass, and a man I don't think anyone will forget.
A man of great conscience.
Yeah. Well, Scott, thank you for sharing those insights. And for all of KQED's news coverage, you can go to kqednews.org.